I found myself homeless at the age of 18, and that just instilled the drive further because I felt abandoned, alone. I was going through a really hard time, lots of trauma, domestic violence situation, all these things. And so
So it was like a city environment, kind of living in a city or more suburbish?
suburbs, but the suburb hood, like there were literally like drive-bys would happen 3 houses down from me on a like regular basis. Our town specifically was actually on the national news years ago for the extreme gang violence that was happening and the mass murders that were happening in broad daylight there.
First of all, totally want to thank you from the bottom of our heart for joining in to the On Target for Success podcast. And one way that you're really helping us is not only by watching, but if you could do us the favor so that we can reach more women and help more women, if you could please subscribe, like, share, those things are huge in terms of YouTube. And that is the thing that's going to help us reach more women worldwide. So let me thank you. I know you're a busy woman, but by taking time to just hit that little like button and subscribe, you are doing your part in serving women globally. And I can't thank you enough. I'm so excited again for another episode here of the On Target for Success podcast, where we are always honored to have amazing women who are just rocking it, who are on target for success in their business, in their field of excellence, in their giftings. And I am so excited, and it's such an honor today to have Miss Sarah Dumas here. She is amazing. She is a visionary mentor, the money coach, and she helps women become fearless female leaders at achieving wealth, impact, freedom. I love that. I love that. I got that off your website because I'm like, yes, well said. So give it up for our beautiful Sarah. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Amy, and thank you for having me.
Yes, it is our pleasure. I've been very excited because there's so many beliefs around money. And as you know, we coach women and women entrepreneurs to scale lots of big business as well. We scale lots of big business as well. And I think this area is so important to focus on because if you are not in that place of receiving and all those little chatters around what money means, look out, you're not going to get there, right? So I would just like to back up a little bit and let's learn like how you got here, how you arrived, a little bit about your journey to success because your story is incredibly inspiring. So just a little bit of background. Could you share with us how you went from experiencing poverty and homelessness at 18 to becoming this successful CFO and building 10 enterprises and scaling corporations to a billion plus? So that's like the all-American success story. I want to hear from you.
Yeah, sure. So, really just taking you through from a high level journey is growing up middle class. I always say like we were like poverty middle class because we were like just on that line. And that quickly turned to a poverty type of situation from the time I was 10 and moving forward. But it was an interesting dynamic for me because while I grew up having to go to food banks and shop at thrift stores and all of these things, I also went to holidays at beautiful homes with lots of food and new cars and all the things. And so part of my family was pretty well off, not like, the richest people ever, but definitely not hurting for money. And so I witnessed firsthand how much, from my perspective, and the story that was built for me is that money gets to be for everybody else except me. And money comes with control. Because for me, when my mom and myself were going through our situation, she'd be asking for help with groceries. And it was like, even just to get, $100 to go grab some groceries, it was like having to go through a whole checklist of questions to, from the other person who was in control of the money and who had the excess money to be able to help us out. And so I saw that dynamic, and that was also a male female dynamic. That was my grandfather to my mom. So it was like, okay, the men control the money, and you have to like jump through hoops in order to get it and cross your fingers and tap twice and all the things, right? It was like a magic trick to try to like, be able to get some money. And so um I put money on a pedestal. I put specifically six figures on a pedestal. It felt like, Broadway lights, 100K. If I could just get there, all of my problems will disappear. And I found myself homeless at the age of 18. And that just instilled the drive further because I felt abandoned, alone. I was going through a really hard time, lots of trauma, domestic violence situation, all these things. And so it just instilled that even more of like, I am the only person who can save me. And I'm going to make sure I never have to experience this again. And so that instilled the hustle mode into me. And I
You're going
gained,
really fast. Or I want to let you go, but you've got so many nuggets
yeah,
here. And I'm like, wait, wait. Okay, I got to pause you a little bit because this is your story.
sure,
So
no problem.
when you're a beautiful, successful woman, you're like, yeah, it's just what I do. But okay, I have to back you up a little bit. Where is it actually that you grew up? I'm curious with
Uh,
that accent you got.
so Long Island, New York, in a
Oh, that's what it
town
is.
called
Okay.
Brentwood, Bayshore, Central Islip. Those were my stomping grounds.
Okay, okay. Because I'm like, there's these fun words that you're saying. I'm like, where is that accent from? Okay,
Yeah,
so
and to add to that, I live in North Carolina now and have for the last couple of years, so I'm sure there's some like interesting dialect there, but
yeah, it's beautiful. So it was like a city environment, kind of living in a city or more suburbish?
suburbs, but the suburb hood. Like there were literally like drive-bys would happen 3 houses down from me on a like regular basis.
Wow.
So
See how
our
you
our
just
town,
skipped over that?
yeah, our town specifically was actually on the national news years ago for the extreme gang violence that was happening and the mass murders that were happening in broad daylight there. So yeah,
So
it was
share
crazy.
that.
So the suburbs, but not the safe suburbs.
Yeah, no, okay, so let's really paint this real picture because what I find with these beautiful women that are on target for success, they take that pain and create some kind of gain, but they never are like, oh, yeah, like I said, it's just what I do. You are growing up in a neighborhood where there's drive-bys. You're growing up in a situation. So take me back. How did your mom get to the place where she had to like beg grandpa for money, or was she ever able to be independent? Like a little bit of what her story always comes like onto us, right? What our mothers go
Yeah,
through.
no. Yeah, and it's so good because it's the driving point for what I do now. And so
Mhm.
I grew up in a very conservative Christian household, so that statement plays a role in the future story. But so growing up, like I said, at first we were like middle class, maybe like poverty middle class when my dad was around. My mom was a stay-at-home mom the whole
Mm.
time. When I was about 10, I think, roughly, my dad literally was like, I'm leaving you next week. I'm moving out. And he left. And
So
he did stay.
what did your dad do for a living, just to kind of gauge? Was
Yeah,
he like,
so he's a CPA. He had a CPA practice, and then he was also working as like an accountant or controller, principal accountant, those kind of things,
yeah.
in a regular job, and also had a business. So and that business was coming off the ground at that time, so it wasn't extremely successful yet. So he was doing what he had to do to get by. But yeah, he decided to leave, and that's
Mm.
okay, like, whatever. And he stayed in my life, so I'm thankful for that. We continue to have a relationship, but my whole like solid home life completely changed because I lived
Absolutely.
with my mom. I, went to school. Like my dad moved to, well, he moved into the city, and then he ended up moving into a better neighborhood, like about 30 minutes from where I was, but my schooling, my growing up, like, was all in this same neighborhood. And so my mom was thrown back into the workforce after 10, 11 years of not working. That
Yeah.
that really hinders your success, especially when you're not prepared.
Right.
Then on top of that, this whole life change triggered her mental health, and her physical health fell apart, her mental health fell apart. She ended up not being able to hold a job. She was calling out like at least a week at a time every single month. And
Mm.
so jobs don't like that. And as it
Yeah.
is, she's maybe making $30,000 as an accounting clerk type of a role. She's got a mortgage, she's got a daughter, she's got like all of these things. And so it started with that, and that slowly falling apart, and then she ended up in and out of mental health institutions and
Wow. And
having
you
to
were a
be
little girl. Excuse me. I just making
um
sure you were like, yeah,
this
so
was
young.
in my teenage years. Yeah. So this
Wow.
was the first time she was admitted. I was 15, and she was basically involuntarily admitted for about 2 to 3 weeks. And then she
Mm.
had about another 2 to 3 weeks of recovery that she had to do at my grandparents' house because she needed some level of support. And my aunt, her sister's a doctor, so she was able to help her through that. Um, so yeah, and this was me on my own at that time. Like I was still seeing my dad and everything, but I also had school to be going to. I had a job, so I couldn't just leave my house. And so I've been raising myself since I was about 10 years old anyway. So even being 15 and basically still having to raise myself, not much changed except my mom wasn't physically in the
You're
house. That was the only
alone.
difference. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, lots of pressure, lots of uncertainty. I went through, I remember a phase in my life, and this was I think before she ended up getting committed, where I would wake up in the middle of the night. It's like 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. I already told you we don't live in a great neighborhood. The side door is wide open and my mom is nowhere to be found. And this is how I wake up from sleeping. Like something woke me up. Thankfully, nobody was in my house, but something woke me up, and I walked out, and the door was wide open and my mom's car was gone. And I
Oh
was
my
like,
goodness.
where is she? Turns
Yeah.
out she was going through manic episodes in her with her bipolar,
Mm.
and she was in this money spending craze. She had refinanced our house and blew $30,000 in like less than a month. It was an insane thing. But
That's insane.
she
Wait, that's the insane thing. Like, see these little nuggets. Like, to live
yeah,
with someone because mental illness is so real, and it does not get enough attention. And there's somehow I've experienced a little bit of that in my family, and so it amazes me how we brush over it. But this is like huge. I can't imagine because you're dealing with so much. Even like, look how you just brush that off. I'm used to raising myself. That's huge, okay. But when you're a teenager and you're just like the world is hard enough in a healthy family, and then you're helping your mom, and your mom's going through manic episodes, like spending money, but just even to leave you alone in the middle of the night without saying, "Hey, Sarah, I'm gonna run to the store" or whatever.
yes,
Like,
yeah.
girl, how are you feeling at that time? I can't even imagine like the unsettledness.
Yeah, it was absolutely unsettled. I ended up finding out later, like in hindsight, of what I was really dealing with. But after that night, I would
Yeah.
end up getting up, and like I would go lay down, have to like get up, go check the door, make sure it was locked again, go lay down,
Mm.
go check the door again, go lay down, go check the door again. Like it was those OCD habits that I was like,
Yeah.
what? I didn't know it was OCD at the time, but I was like, that's
Mhm.
what I had to do to feel safe. I started, I went from being a person who my parents used to say, an atomic bomb could go off in the middle of the night. You're not going to wake up Sarah, because like I was such a sound sleeper. I went from being such a sound sleeper to waking up at the littlest noise and like jumping out
Mm.
of bed in the middle of the night to make sure like she's still in bed, the door's locked, there's not somebody in my house. Like, so it was absolutely like crazy but I'm
Yeah.
so calm in talking about it because it was my life. I had to figure out how to adapt. There was nobody. I didn't have any resources. I didn't have any like person I could really call. Like I had my grandparents. There were some people who thankfully family friends were the ones who helped her get admitted in the first place, because what ultimately ended up happening is she had a mental breakdown spiral where she locked herself in her closet and she was threatening to commit suicide, and that's illegal in the state of North Carolina. I'm sorry, New York. Like I live in North Carolina, so. But at the time I was in New York, it's illegal for you to threaten to take your life in the presence of a minor when there's no other
Mm.
adult there. And so I called a family
Oh,
friend
you're home
who
alone with her while she did this?
yes.
Wait, take us to that day because you're going really fast. Like, honey, I can't.
Yeah.
As it's so important just for the context of all the things that you've overcome and how dedicated you are to helping women. So you're watching your mom, and your mom saying, what was she saying? Like she's in the closet. What was she saying?
So I don't remember what triggered it. I know we had went to church that day, or we went to some, it was like nighttime. So I think it was like we used to go to like Wednesday night service. So I think it was a nighttime thing. And I don't remember what triggered it, but I remember her saying like, oh, like she was on a spiral of like, there's no reason for her to be here. Like
Mm,
she was on that kind of a spiral.
mm,
Um, and I just remember like being shocked almost at her response to whatever happened. I don't remember like the backstory. I think there was like a hard conversation or something she had with somebody at church that day. And then I remember like the ride home being whatever. And I was kind of like, Mom, what's wrong? Or trying to talk to her. And she was just kind of like in a different headspace. And then when we got home, she just went into her room, and I remember trying to talk to her because I remember like knocking on the door and everything. And I thought the door was locked. So I didn't try to open it. And then when I opened her bedroom door, she was not there. So I was like, Mom, where are you? And like she wouldn't respond. And then she ended
wow.
up being in her closet. And like she was like, the closet door didn't lock, but she was holding it closed. And I remember like trying to open it, and she wouldn't let
Aw,
me open it. And so I was like, come out. She's like, no, no, no. And so I just was in this place of like, I don't know what to do. What do I do? Like, is
yeah,
call
yeah.
911? Like, who the heck do I call? So I called, luckily that night, I guess whatever was happening, a family friend had picked up on that also went to our church. And so she just mentioned to me before we had left, she said, hey, if there's ever anything that happens, like give me a call, like know that you can call me. And I'm like,
Mm.
okay. So I call her and I'm like, I don't know what to do. And she's like, tell me what's going on. And I told her, and she's like, oh no, Sarah, like I'm calling 911 immediately. This cannot be. And so the police arrived and got her to
Aw.
come out of the closet. That was the first time. And they were like, we're taking your mom. And I was like, what do you mean you're taking my mom? Like, is she arrested? Like, I had no idea about
Poor
oh,
thing.
having, whatever, I forget the term that they call it, but
Baker
the mental
addicted or whatever they
requirements.
yeah.
Yeah, they were legally obligated to take her to the hospital, to the mental health unit is basically what they ended up doing. And they ended up holding her there, and I stayed home, and family friends came by to check on me. They went to the hospital to check on her, and they were just being the liaison to communicate. And so she ended up staying there, I think that night, and then she was immediately taken to a private healthcare facility and institutionalized. And she was there for 2 to 3 weeks, I think. I remember visiting her one time. There was a lot of guilt trip about visiting her, and I did not want
Oh,
to visit her. And I visited her one time, and I was like, I will never, like, I don't want to be in that environment. It was like if you've never experienced that, it's
no, what was
not,
it like? Tell us what it's like. What was she
I
especially
would
a kid
say,
so young too. You're so young.
yeah, I would say it's not like the movies. At least it wasn't for the place that I visited her. Like, you usually are like, you walk into a room where everybody's drugged and like half out of it and like bars on the windows. It wasn't like that. It was more like it felt like an apartment building.
Mm,
And I walked into this, I remember walking up these stairs, and there was like a living area, and like everybody's kind of like sitting down. It was like everybody was out and about. And I think that's what made me the most uncomfortable, because I'm like, these people are institutionalized, and like they could just grab me if they wanted to. Like that was very,
the fear.
and yeah, and I'm sure that there was levels of security that I was not aware about, or things where, that probably that percentage of the population that was free to move about was not of risk like that. But in my head, I'm thinking what I've seen in the movies, and then I walk into a room that feels like it's packed and all these
Um,
people are around, and I'm just like,
Plus your mom, you've just been traumatized watching your mom go through this saying that she doesn't feel like living anymore. Like, so you're
Right.
still in a trauma state, even those weeks after. Like, how did you like calm yourself down thinking, is my mom going to be here? Is my mom going to be all right? Like,
Yeah.
what were the thoughts like going through your head? Because wow.
I yeah, I don't really remember having too many thoughts that way. But what I do remember is I basically continued to live my life. Like I just kept my routine. I had
Mm,
school, I had work. I didn't miss any of that. And
wow.
I think that that's what really helped me is just like I needed to stay in what my routine was and I needed to like not forget about it, but I needed that to be whatever course it's going to take, like I'll
Mm,
deal with it when and if there's something to deal with, but let her just get the space she needs and get healed and healthy and I'll do what I need. And so it was interesting because when she was first in there, she was excited to see me. She was like her normal self, but like seemed like she was doing better. She was like excited to show me her room, which I was like, this is weird. Like, I don't want to see your room. Like, it was just the whole process where it was just very uncomfortable feeling. Like I'm like, this is not something you should be excited to be at. Like this is, you know what I mean? So it felt more like a space of like, I should just let you be here and you do what you gotta do and I'll see you when you're good. Like that's what it felt like it should have
Well,
been.
that's good. Like you could separate that because like you were talking about a lot of times I know like growing up Christian, you have a like there's a lot of guilt, or in my experience anyway, the guilt around
Yeah.
honoring your mother and father, and you know, if you're not able to help them, even if you're creating your life, like that always that guilt, like am I honoring them, so that you could separate at such a young age and still stay focused on what you had to do just to protect yourself. That's
Yeah. And I really attribute that to like you have to keep in mind I had 5 years of basically solo
mm,
parenting myself before this happened.
wow.
So I had already processed through the worry. Like I do remember early, like taking a step back to like maybe when I was 10, 11, my mom, when she was first going through her health things, I remember one of the first things she went through that was irrelevant to the mental health was she had varicose veins and I used to have to she would take me to every one of her doctor's appointments to
Mm.
basically be her medical advocate. And so she always wanted me to hear what the doctor had to say and help her ask questions and whatever. And so I remember in that thing at being at that young of an age, the way that the doctor was talking about varicose veins and blood clots and all of these risks, like I thought my mom was about to die. And I really remember like even processing that. And it's interesting too, because also growing up, one keynote was I never really felt close to my mom. Like if you ask me, like I feel like I really don't know what it's like to have a mom in the traditional sense.
Mhm.
My mom, though she was a stay-at-home mom, she was a leader in the church. She led the children's youth community. She was active in church building. And so I didn't get a lot of one-on-one time with my mom. It was always
Mm.
there's other kids she's babysitting. There's 5 other people over my house. We're doing things together, but we're doing things with other people together. So my parent that I was the closest to was my father. He was the one that like on the weekends he'd take me out to the movies. Me and him had our show that we would watch at night. It was me and him together. And my mom was just kind of a she was off doing her own thing. She was busy. She would join us if she was available, but other than that, really it was my dad. My dad would go on my school field trips with me. My dad would help me study. My dad
Okay.
would so so that's also an important factor because I didn't have this like deep mom attachment. But what was interesting is that when she was going in this health crisis, and again, this is my dad left, it's me and my mom. I really wanted to go live with my dad, but was not an option and did not happen from a court perspective. And
Mm.
so um
Wow.
uh so that transition had just happened. Adding on top of that, then the doctors saying all these scary things that it probably wasn't as scary, but
Mm.
as a 10, 11-year old, I'm not understanding. You're talking about
Yeah.
your varicose vein could cause a brain clot that could go to your head, and you got to be careful because then you could die. Like, I literally remember him saying those things. He probably delivered it completely different, but that's what I heard.
You just had no business being there. I mean, just as a kid, you just
Right.
need to be playing. Yeah.
Right. So it's so funny you say that because I remember literally in fourth grade, they started having me have therapy in school. And I literally remember the woman going, "You need to stop hanging around the adults and go play with children your own age." And I looked dead at her and I said, "Children are constantly around me all the time." Like, it's just for me, I've always been an old soul. I remember the family friend that I had called during that time. I used to babysit her children, and this was when I was about 13 or so. And one time she's driving me home and she's having this full on conversation with me, and we're talking and I'm giving her life advice. And she has a moment. This is like a 35-year-old woman talking to like a 13-year-old. She turns to me and she goes, "Why am I talking to you about this? You're only 13." And I was like, and I literally responded to her. I was like, "It's okay. I know, like, I could give you advice." But like, that's how I've
Wow.
always been that way. And I
Yeah.
don't know. I mean, maybe when I was 5, I wasn't that way. I don't know. I'm sure it had something to do with the life
Mhm.
changes as well. But I was always surrounded by children my own age, but children my own age didn't. I was usually the oddball out. I was like, they were like, "Oh, you're just a know-it-all. Leave us alone. We don't want to play with you." And so I was like, "Forget y'all. I'll go be entertained with the adults because I want to talk to them more anyway." So,
It's
but anyway,
so interesting. You were so grown. So
yeah,
did you learn to play then? Have you learned to play now? Like was that something you had to incorporate then later or
yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I think I'll attribute it a lot to my husband. My husband is the person we met when after my whole thing when I was 18, and we met right before I turned 19, and he is so playful. He's funny.
oh,
He was the class clown, and I'm always, well, I'm much better now, but like when we first met, I was the like serious, rigid, like mom energy, like we gotta get this done. And he's just like the big goofball, whatever. So he taught me to not take life so seriously. And he's just like, "Can you just enjoy this? Can we just do this? Can we just have fun?" And I'm like, "I guess we could have fun."
well, yeah, it's
So
interesting because like you wanted to live with your dad, but then so you're 15, your mom goes into this hospital situation. Does she come home and then like how do you end up homeless from that gap then to 18? Because you're a smart girl, you're a responsible girl. Like how does that all twist then? Especially if you had a dad that loved you, right?
yeah.
He did leave, so it was the court's reason that you couldn't live with him. It wasn't that he didn't want you to live with him. It was the legalities, our little broken system.
Yes, and I don't know, I don't know how much he fought for it either, so and that's okay, whatever, but
Yeah.
I remember even me and him having a conversation of like, there were talks, both of my parents had this conversation with me, but it never actually happened where they were like, "Hey, you might have to come to court and the judge might ask you who you want to live with." And of course they were both like, "Make sure you pick me." Right.
Oh,
But
no.
I remember like I was fully ready to tell them I wanted to live with my dad, but that day never happened. So I don't know exactly the whole story of what did or didn't happen there. But I'm sure it had something to do with, just the male, female, they always lean towards the mother. And there was no, at that time, she had not been institutionalized. Like there was no reason to not,
Pull you at that time.
yeah. And she was the one with the house. She was the one,
Yeah.
so from a safety, from a not safety, but like a comfort standpoint, she was also the better choice. So how did I go from that to homeless? There was a lot of hurt from my dad's side as well. Uh, there were just some different dynamics there and his life changes and choices, that at one point, and this was during that point, I wasn't even talking to him. And like I didn't even walk at my graduation, and I remember
Mm.
my dad calling my mom and asking her about graduation, and my mom's like, "Hey, your dad's on the phone. He wants to talk to you, and he wants to find out why you don't wanna go to graduation." And I looked at her, I said, "I don't have a father, so just hang up the phone."
Oh,
So
teenagers are so challenging, even. Yeah.
there was and I understand now we've had this conversation because there was one point, I went on this whole rebellious streak. Me and my best friend ran away when we were 15, and this was the breaking point a little bit, but my dad was furious about that situation. We ran away. Nobody could find us for about 3 days. Um,
Mhm.
and yeah, it was crazy. And when we were finally found the next day, my dad came to my mom's house and gave me a very stern talking to and a very stern parenting. I'll just leave it at that. And
Do you have kids now?
yes, I do.
So you know that feeling, right? You never love anything so much, and you're like,
Oh
I
yeah.
just know where my kids were
And
for
I
3
know
days.
yes, I know at that time it was just like they probably thought
Fear.
we were dead. They thought
Yeah.
we were in a ditch. I can
Whoa.
understand because we were staying with people, but they had no way of even connecting the dots. These were not people that were known friends or anything. But anyway, so I totally understand. So he was like, "Pack your stuff. You're coming to live with me." I guess him and my mom had a whole thing, and he's like, "You can't control her. You can't take care of her. She needs rules. She's coming to my house." So I moved in with him, and that was hard because that was a transition between oh gosh, 10th grade, half of 10th grade, where I had to leave all of my friends that I've known my whole life. I had never been in another school district. So all the people that I just grew up with, I'm literally being pulled out of that completely unexpectedly, which rightfully so. He didn't want me connecting
Yeah.
with another girl that had just ran away and all that. And um and pulls me into this new school. And so that was fine. But I really started having really bad problems at that school to the point where I felt like I could not trust myself. Like I was going to get arrested for like stabbing somebody. Like it was that kind of intensity of
Anger?
bullying that, huh?
So the anger, or like just like were you getting bullied or what?
Anger, feeling like I had to protect myself because there were these group of girls, there was about 4 of them that I was friends with them at first, and then I don't know what changed, and there was this whole thing. And
Oh,
I mean, this is a another this is a softer neighborhood a little bit, but still had some of that edge where it's like, I mean, if you're from the hood, you know girls fight with razor blades and knives. Like they're not this isn't
what?
some cute like slap match. Like if it's gonna happen, it's gonna go down. You know what I mean? So like
I
I
that's a new world for me. Even as you're describing it, other than the movies, it's really I've had some great friends or different guests over the years and things like that. So tell like so what is it like? So people it's like a little bit of a gang neighborhood too?
Yeah. It wasn't as intense, it was a lot softer, like, where I came from, it was, like, 95% gang, maybe 5% regular people or whatever you wanna call it. Where I
Yeah.
was now, it was probably about 25% gang, maybe 75%. But, of course, I'm coming from that neighborhood. What
Yeah.
kind of friends do you think I'm gonna connect with when I go to
Yeah.
this new school?
Right. The
The
ones you're
people
used
I'm
to.
used to.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah,
Wow,
and,
Sarah.
this is like the world of like, when you know you're gonna get into a fight, you Vaseline your face up. You see girls in sweatpants, Vaseline on their face and their hair up. They've probably got a razor blade under their tongue or in their hair, and like that's the kind of
Seriously. What
yeah.
year was this? What are we talking
This
about?
was back early 2000s. I graduated high school in 2005. So early 2000s.
Wow. They would put baskets. See, you're teaching me. This is, I don't know. It's interesting. I think even for our listeners that that's what you did. So would they like gang up as a group on you or like,
Yeah, yeah, a lot of times. And so what ended up happening was whatever the shift that happened, like I said, these girls used to be my friends. And then all of a sudden,
wow.
like the last, let's say 2 months of my 11th grade, we're in this weird, like, thing with each other where they're ignoring me, I'm ignoring them. And then a couple of the girls, this one girl in particular, she was just an instigator. And we would have to be on the bus because we went to what's called in Long Island BOCES, which is like it's a extracurricular program that you get to apply to as a high school student to you're bused to a different program where you could learn a trade. So I was there for cosmetology. They were there for nurse to become a nurse's aide. So this bus ride was like 30 to 45 minutes each way. It was a pretty decent bus ride. And I had to ride the bus with these girls. And then when we come back to school, we had, depending on the school you went to, you either went to the AM session for BOCES or PM session. We went to the PM session, which meant that when we got back to school, school had already let out. We have to then stand there and wait for the late bus to take us. So there's a period of time waiting back at school. So not only did I had to figure out how to just like ignore them on the bus, but also I had to figure out somewhere else to go. There's not a lot of places to go, especially when you're talking about, I think for BOCES, we maybe had 2 busloads of kids. So not a lot of kids, maybe 60 kids total. It's not a full school. We're not allowed back into the school. So we just had to kind of stand there and wait. So they start messing with me and instigating. And I remember this one day I was sitting in a different seat completely away from them. I was sitting towards the front of the bus. They had sat towards the back. And pretending to be on the phone. And this girl keeps calling my name and she's like, Sarah, Sarah. And she's trying to get my attention. And I knew if I looked, she was going to do something, like throw something
yeah,
in my face or whatever, because that's what she was waiting for. So this kid sits next to me, and this poor kid, he was like this sweet, like little nerdy kid, but he sits next to me and she keeps calling my name. I'm ignoring and whatever. She calls his name and he looks and she chugs a thing of water in his face, like, open, just sprays him with water. And
rude.
I was like, thank gosh I am on the inside of this seat. And thank goodness I didn't turn around, because if that was me, like, that would have
You would
flipped
have
the switch.
snapped.
Like, we would have been fighting. And like, that was the last thing I wanted to do, because I was already trying to get out of that school because I knew the situation was turning bad. And the agreement me and my mom had, and my dad was fully aware of the problems I was having at school. And I understand his approach as a parent, not wanting to fight your kids fight. I get it, but nothing was being done.
You're
So,
being bullied at school and the ride. Didn't you have like then you couldn't like go to teachers? It was like no snitching kind of thing, or you get it worse, or what? Like
well,
what?
I remember this one instance that something had escalated on the bus when I got to BOCES. Like, we would have to sit on the bus and wait for the BOCES to open their doors. So while we were on that bus, something happened and I can't remember exactly what, but and I was literally about to fight this girl and I was like, leave me alone. Like, I will fight you. And she's like, I'm not trying to fight you. I'm like, then why are you messing with me? Like, you're literally trying to instigate a fight. And then you're like, I don't want to fight you, stop bullying me. Like, I'm not gonna sit here and tolerate it. And so whatever, we had our thing. And I told my BOCE teacher, I said, I cannot go on that bus this afternoon, because if I go on that bus this afternoon and see her again, like, it's going to be a problem. And so he was like, it's fine, stay here, let's call your dad, I'll stay here until he could pick you up. And that's what he
Aw.
ended up doing. But that could not be a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
We were let out of BOCES at like maybe 3 o'clock. My dad didn't get home until like 6. So like, that could not be a standing thing. And
Yeah.
the drive, it was just all in all ways inconvenient. Um, but I remember, like, my mom knew I wanted to leave. My dad knew I wanted to leave, but I don't think he thought I was going to. And my mom knew everything that was going on. I mean, they both did. But she said, she was like, as long as you do not get in trouble, I will let you come back here for 12th grade. So I knew I had to sit on my hands and not get in trouble, not get into a fight. I can't get expelled, because if I do, I can't go back to my other school for my last year. So that's what I did. And I just like got through it. And there was a lot of frustration and a lot of things there that like, but got through it to see that through and get back to my school for 12th grade. Um During the summer between 11th and 12th grade, my, let's call him high school sweetheart, it was a guy that I had been like seeing on and off since like sixth grade. And in ninth grade, he moved to Florida. So we had some long distance relationship, but we would we would talk all the time. We would see each other for summer. So we spent the summer together that summer. And then when he came back home, he broke up with me. And like this was somebody like we were talking about getting married. We were talking about our plans for after high school. Like we had everything planned out. And then he just breaks up with me. And I was like, and there was another guy that I knew was interested in me. We had been friends for a couple of years, but we, we never dated or anything like that. And um, my best friend was like, well, so and so's been calling you. You should call him back and just hang out with him to get over this guy. And I was like, oh,
Every
worst advice ever.
yeah.
So I started hanging out with this other guy. And it was great at first, I guess. And it was like, I had known him for a couple of years, so I was fairly comfortable with him. And then when we officially started dating, he would start saying things like, oh, don't wear earrings out. Don't like just wear a baggy shirt. Like look like he wanted me to look bummy out because he didn't want any other guys trying to talk to me, which I understand, whatever. But it was like, oh, that's so cute. You care about me so much,
No, what's the abuse starting already?
right?
Like, yes, I worked with abuse counseling and treatment, and it's just yeah, oh, yep, this story continue. It's just like every time I'm like, oh, you got to go through it so you can be aware of it, right?
Yes.
Sometimes,
And it's very interesting because I never saw myself going down this route at all. I'd be like, I'd never be that person. I would judge girls like this, right? Like I was like on my high horse, how quickly we fall. But
mhm, mhm.
but he was good. He was a good manipulator.
Yes.
And they're good at playing these games. But
They
so
are. They are so good. And that's why I was like, until you've had the experience, right?
yeah,
Because I remember asking, like, how could girls fall for that? Because you'd see these beautiful, like yourself, beautiful, intelligent women. You're like, what? Because it's insidious. They slowly change you, they slowly break you down, and then do the crazy making and the whole thing. But anyway, woo, girl. So you're just like a kid too. You're like 17 now when you're dating,
exactly.
and you're on a rebound. So your heart got broken. So it was perfect
Exactly.
timing for him to come in, and because then
Yeah.
you're doubting yourself, like, oh, I was gonna marry this guy. What's wrong with me? And then he comes in at the perfect time. Nothing. Well, but you might want to take your earrings out. No, okay.
All right.
So he's got you
And
bombing in the streets, and he's got you dressed up in other times.
yeah. And
Wow.
so also the key component here is I just moved out of my dad's house. It was the end of 11th grade. I moved out. I spent the summer with my mom, and then now I'm at my mom's. And when that happened, my dad was offended and basically like
Oh.
I think, I mean, from a parenting perspective, I know he was like giving me space and probably like, well, she'll call me when she's calmed down. I took it as he didn't want to talk to me. So I was like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
now I don't have a dad. You're mad. You didn't protect me with my bullying. Fine.
Mm-hmm.
I'll fend for myself. I'll figure it out. And so that started that rift and we didn't talk for several years from that point. And so anyway, so this guy comes into my life. Uh and very quickly, this relationship lasted about a little over a year, a little longer when I share the other context of the story, but um for the relationship part, it was a little over a year. And when we first got together, he told me, he was like, hey, my ex-girlfriend is pregnant and she says it's mine, but I know it's not because I haven't been with her in like 6 months. So there's no possible way that the baby's mine. And me, I'm like, okay, cool,
Yeah.
whatever. And so there were different things that were coming up during the relationship. He disappeared on Valentine's Day and was completely unreachable. And like made up this whole story, and I almost broke up with him that day, and I wish I did, because I started seeing him around the December timeline. So this was only maybe 2-3 months in. And there was this whole thing with Valentine's Day. I went to go see him to break up with him face to face instead of over the phone. And he was like, "No, please take me back." Like very apologetic. And
Mhm.
I stayed, even though I should not have. And this just continued, and it got worse, and the controlling got worse, and but it was all like cute, lovey dovey, like, oh, he cares. Um, and then August, his son was born, and it's like a flip switched. He was forced, quote unquote, by his sister and mom to go help her with the baby for a week. So he went to go stay with her for a week. Unbeknownst to me, like I was the side chick the entire time. This is what I find
Oh,
out later on.
wow.
Me and her finally
Wow.
talked. So very, yeah, very crazy. And
Aw.
mind you, he was living with me at one point. So he's living with the side chick while he has this anyway. Crazy, crazy. So,
Well, I always think like, why did that happen for you, right? I always think like everything in our life
yes,
happens for us to prepare us. So your takeaway out of that, as you're describing this, like what was the learning in that? Like, why did that happen for you? Do you think?
can I finish the whole story? Because there's a
Yes,
I
absolutely. Oh,
I would
okay. I thought
say
you
the
were
first
saying, oh my gosh,
yeah,
yes. I thought
the
you were
first
like,
thing is, like, trusting my gut, right? Like, I knew something was off. I knew I shouldn't have even called him that time, my friend said, but I
yeah.
was like, "Well, I'm bored," and like, "Okay," but I shouldn't have. There was a reason why me and him were friends for 3 years, and it never went further than that, and I should have just trusted my gut. So
There
that's
you
the
go.
first takeaway.
Okay, cool, cool. Yeah.
So a flip switched after the birth of his son, and all of a sudden, he thought he could put his hands on me. And I already told you, like, I'm not one to just take a hit and not give a hit. So this turned into a very unhealthy relationship. And I think I shocked him by hitting him back when he would put his hands on me, because come to find out, he had been abusing not only the baby mom, but the baby mom's
Mm.
mom, the grandma, for years, and they never
What?
back on him. Yeah, they never defended him themselves. And so
Wow.
yeah, so before I knew all of this is 4
Girl.
months before I understand anything. So he has his baby August. I find out I'm pregnant September, maybe October, and yeah, and then by the end of October, I my mom kicks me out of the house, and I'm homeless, and I'm couch surfing with him, and
And pregnant.
yes,
Oh, you poor thing. So you're 17. You're 17 at this point, right?
at this point, I am now 18.
Okay. And did you finish school at this point? Or are you still in
Yes, I
school?
had just graduated high school, and I was supposed to be
Wow.
going to college for the first semester, but that didn't happen. Well, it did and it
Wow.
didn't. I did start going, but then ended up dropping out. And so I'm homeless for a few weeks. We're in like I find out a lot of things about him, like that he's dealing. His mom's a crackhead and doing crack in the bathroom of the house where
Oh
we're
my
couch surfing at.
goodness.
All sorts of craziness. I find out more things about, I think there was like some incest going on between him and his sister, like crazy things. And I'm
This
like,
is
what?
amazing. You survived all of these things.
Yes.
Wow.
And like,
Wow.
I don't even know how I ended up in that, because this was not like me, but it was like the hole kept getting deeper and deeper, because
Mhm.
put in, just even homeless, for example, my mom kicks me out. I don't have anybody to go to. My dad's not in, like, even through that time of being homeless, I tried reaching out to my dad, and I tried to tell
Mm.
him, and it took me forever to get in contact with him. And then when I did get in contact with him and I told him what was happening, I was like, "Hey, can I come stay with you?" And he said, "Absolutely not," and hung up the phone on me. And I get it. Like, I did explain that I was pregnant, and I think that that really upset him, because that's not what he wanted or saw for me.
Mhm.
Um, But yeah, got me no sympathy. So I ended up talking to my
And you're
mom.
with this abusive guy, and you're, oh my goodness, girl.
Yeah.
Wow. With
So
your baby.
and it was crazy because even his friends, I remember there was a couple of his friends that were just jerks, and like they would see what would happen and they would laugh about it, and they were like, "Yo, you're crazy, you're bugging," but they wouldn't do anything to stop it. But he had this one friend, his name was Wesley, and I love Wesley. I don't know where he is in the world, but I just remember him like taking a stand for me. And I remember one day we were hanging out, and um the guy I was dating, like, went to, like, grab me or whatever because he wanted money, and he knew I had some money on me, so he was like, "Give me, like, $5" or whatever it was, and I wasn't giving him any money, so he got really agitated. He went to go grab me by the back of my hair, and this guy Wesley was like, "If you put one hand on her, like, we're gonna fight right now, and, don't you ever do that in front of me, don't you
Oh,
disrespect a woman in front of me," and he really stood up for me in that moment, um and yeah, but he was, like, the only one. There was nobody, like, it's crazy, like, literally 10 people around and nobody, they're just like, "Oh, he's crazy, he's bugging, he's this, he's that." It's like, how are you just gonna watch this? Like, please,
no
listeners,
one
you
held him accountable.
a woman, you better
Yeah.
step in because, like, it's sickening how many people just sit there and are, like, make excuses for it or won't jump in or whatever. But anyway,
Agreed. Agreed. Wait, pause on that because like that's the number one danger to women is men. More women die at the hands of men than anything else. It's so sad and sick. And what you said about sickening, that the God, that thank God for Wesley's, but when you get to a point where men can watch a woman being abused, are they afraid that that guy's going to go crazy on them? Like, I don't even know where their mind is. I would like to have a guest to learn about that, an
yeah.
expert in that, because that's something that I've never understood, right? You're this, how big was he in size
So
comparison?
so I would say from my perspective, he was, I think he was like 5'11", and he was maybe like 150. He wasn't like, maybe
Okay.
175.
I'm just
But
like, I'm
his friends, he had a friend. His friend who almost saw, actually 2 of them who almost saw everything are like linebacker dudes. They're like 6'3", 300 pounds. Like, you can't, come on. And what's crazy is like, he what one thing I have learned about abusers is they're literally cowards, because when I would punch him or whatever, or like hit back, he would stop. Like, and I remember the first time he did something. He used to like grab me. Like, grabbing was a lot of his thing. Like, grab my hair, throw me against the wall, whatever. It wasn't a lot of like punching or anything like that. But I remember he grabbed me one time and I think he like pinned me against the wall. And when he went to go turn around to leave, I punched him dead in his back. And he like stood up and like he was shocked. He like looked scared almost. And I was like, this isn't gonna happen. Like, I'm not the one to sit here and just like take you putting your hands on me. And while he never stopped, I do feel, after talking to the baby mom and everything and hearing her story and the things he would do to her, he never tried half that stuff with me. And I firmly believe it's because I would put my hands right back on him.
and
And
you didn't call the police. Like that's what I'm amazed. He's abusing
oh,
all
I
these
called the
people.
police so many times. I called the
Really?
police so many times. There is no, this is, oh, we're gonna go on a whole nother soapbox on this one.
It's okay because I'm thinking of all these women, like to hear your overcomer story and your dedication to women. It's like what you've come through to be able. It's so amazing.
Yes, there is no help for women. Like, that's a whole nother sad part. Like, I called the cops so many times, and a lot of the times I couldn't actually call the cops in the sense of being on the phone and telling them, but I would call 911, let it sit, and like I heard them pick up and I would just not say anything because I'm like, come on. And then I'd hang up and then I'd call back and I'd hang up and I'd call back, and I kept doing it. And
Oh,
sometimes an
because he
officer,
was gonna hit you. You mean like so you couldn't really talk, but you were trying to
he
get
could
help?
not know. Yeah, I needed, and I'm the only person in the house. A lot of these times, my mom wasn't even there. So
Wait, he hit you in
I
your own house? He was beating
Yeah.
you up at your mom's house?
Yes,
Oh,
he
is
was
that why
living
your
with
mom
me for a
kicked you
couple of
out?
months.
Oh,
No, 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 she had kicked him out first, and then she kicked me out when she found out I was pregnant.
mm,
But, um, yes, so this would happen in my own house, and there's nobody to help me. So,
wow.
what do you
Sa
think is gonna happen if I call the police and he knows I called the police and it takes 5, 10 minutes for those
it's
police
gonna
to arrive?
escalate.
I'm not stupid, like, right? So, I'm like, I'm trying to give cops hints. I'm calling, I'm, like, whispering if I can. And I'd be calling like 10 times in a row. So you would think like this is not a kid playing a prank, like do something, come to the house. I remember several times like I would see a parole car either come by or stop across the street or a little bit down or whatever. They wouldn't necessarily stop in front of my house. I think they were trying to see if something was going on, but they wouldn't come and knock. And that's
Mhm.
what I, like, needed them to do is, like, come knock, come do a check,
Wellness
come
check or something.
see. Yeah. But there were also times, like, I straight up called the cops on him. There was one time I remember, like, he was coming home and he didn't have a key, so he would, like, wait for me to open the door, and I forget what had happened either that day or beforehand, but we were in some kinda, like, argument or whatever, and I was like, I did not wanna see him. He was banging on the door, and I was like, "Go away," and he's, like, banging. So I call the cops, and they come, and they check his pockets, and they basically tell him, like, "We're gonna be paroling around here, and don't ever let me see you again," and made him leave. Came back, like, 30 minutes later. Like, this is not somebody who is going to be responsive of that. Like they need to actually like get locked up and get some ramifications. Um and even when it did finally escalate and he did get locked up, which was way fast forward to the story, I had broke up with him. I had met my husband really accidentally. I was not looking for another relationship at all. And he continued to stalk me. It would not be uncommon for me to have 80 plus missed calls from him a day. He'd be calling my
Wow.
phone. At one point I would start sleeping with the phone off the hook. And then this was also where again, like early, well, yeah, like 2005, 2006, and I had a landline. The landline companies had just started offering a feature where you could actually shut your phone off and not allow calls in past a certain time. So I had to put that on our phone because we'd be getting calls at 2, 3 in the morning, like all freaking night.
Mm,
And, so anyway, but I knew he was stalking me. When I did answer the phone, he'd be like, "Oh, I'm watching you. I know what you were wearing today. You were wearing this, you were wearing that, you were talking to this person, you went here." Like, so he was actively stalking me for over 6 months after I had broke up with him. And finally,
very
my husband, when we were dating, he found out that, um, I so let me back up a little bit before we get into this story. I found out I was pregnant. I'm homeless. I come back home. Within a week of coming back home, while I was homeless, I was having a lot of pain. I was peeing frequently and I was having a little bit of spotting. So I was like, okay, maybe UTI, but I couldn't get to a doctor. I didn't have health insurance. Like,
mm,
I didn't have time to get to the clinic and whatever. So when I got back home, that was my first priority. I was like, Mom, I need to go to the clinic or the ER because this is what I'm experiencing. Went to the first ER. They were like, "Yeah, you have a UTI." So they gave me things for UTI. And I'm like, "Are you sure I'm not having a miscarriage?" And they're like, "No, no, no, you're not having a miscarriage." 2, 3 days later, the bleeding got worse. And so I went to a different hospital and ended up getting confirmed that I was having a miscarriage. The Just to put this into perspective, Amy, and the lack of support of what I had in my life, the only person who ever consoled me about that pregnancy loss was the ER doctor herself.
oh,
That's it.
I'm
That's the only person
sorry.
who hug, whoever
Oh,
consoled
I'm
me.
so sorry. Mm,
So, it was an interesting thing because like I said, and I said this when I first said it, I was raised in a very religious household, but
yeah.
I did not meet God until I was
Mm,
curled up in a ball at the bottom of the shower grieving my pregnancy loss.
Wow. Powerful girl.
Yeah.
And what did you feel like when you're there? Oh my, yeah, that's when you're at the bottom, when the loss is so, so hard that you question everything. It's amazing because you lost your parents, sort of in a way, you lost their support. Your mom broke down. She wasn't the woman, not that you had that maternal connection like you were describing. Then you lost the man you thought you were going to marry, and you get to this guy who just beat you. Then you have this little hope. It's amazing that you found the hope and love in there, even when everyone turned against you. And then you have that loss.
Yeah.
And then that's a lot of loss, girl. And then when you found God, what happened? Like when you say you found God there on the shower
Yeah.
floor, describe that.
It was
Mm,
I had no one at that time. I literally the only place I could share how I was really feeling, my thoughts, was this little composition notebook that I
oh,
think I might still have to this day. Or actually, I think I burned it a couple of years ago because it was just it was really
release.
dark because I was in that place. I
Yeah.
was in a place where it was and not that, you know, so to add fuel onto the fire of this, while I was going through this, everybody turned their back on me, even those people who I was able to call to help my mom get admitted, people who literally knew me from the time I was born. It turned into the usual religious rejection. Well, that's what you get for having sex before marriage. Well, you should have never got caught up with that guy. Are you making that up? That sounds like you're exaggerating. Is that really what happened? And I'd be like, my mom saw most of this. She's actually the first person. I didn't even think I was in an abusive relationship until one day driving home, she asked me if he ever put his hands on me. And at that point, he never had. And I was like, why would you ask me that? I was so oblivious to what was happening. My mom saw it 10 feet away.
Yeah.
So I was like, how dare you? And I literally remember a couple of people that I knew, I explained to them what happened. I was like, yeah, I had a miscarriage. And they're like, you really had a an abortion and you just don't want to tell anybody because you're ashamed.
Are you, oh my goodness.
I was like,
Wow.
yes, because I had blood pouring down my leg while I was
Mm.
literally working at Macy's because I had an abortion. That
Oh,
doesn't happen.
poor thing.
So, yeah. And
Here,
so,
let me say sorry for all those people that just ignorance, just unkindness. I'm sorry you had to go through that.
thank
And
you.
you shouldn't, I mean, wow. Compassion. That's why you became such a beautiful bright light, because you know what it's like to have everyone turn against you and you don't want people to feel that, right? Wow.
Exactly.
I'm just so inspired by it. That's just all kinds of yuckiness, all kinds of
Yeah.
and then you said, though, I'm really interested because I had a conversation a little bit earlier today about what does it mean to believe in God? What does it mean to be a Christian? What does it mean to have these kindness and empathies and to be successful? Like, how do we define success? Is it, leaving a person feeling better after they've met you than before? Is it having the fortitude to love on somebody when they're maybe not being kind, or is it putting yourself, not being inconvenienced, but saying it's the convenience that I'm there for someone, that I can be so honored as to help them during the dark time, like all these things. What does it mean? But just like, that's why I'm so curious, because everybody has these different bottoms, right? And when you're sitting there all alone, you are all alone, you had just basically lost so much, like friends, family, even though he was an abuser, but just hope, and then your baby, and then how do you define that moment where you say, I found God? What was it like? Yeah,
Yeah.
take me there. I want to be that with you.
I yeah. So, I remember specifically in the bathroom and that moment, feeling like a supernatural comfort and like
Hmm.
this feeling of lost, alone, misunderstood, and then this really, at that time, it was probably even just a tinge of that comfort. It wasn't even like this, like, big fluffy blanket that I felt, but it was more like I had left the church technically about 2 so years before that. Um, and I felt like I had gotten what I needed from there and whatever, but um in that moment, I felt like a deepening of knowing that I was going through that for a reason. It was also really like, so like you said, and you set it up perfectly, of like all of this empathy and all of that that's developed. I back me up before this happened, back me up to 16 years old prior. I was a extremely judgmental person. I would
Mm.
have been like, "Oh, you had an abortion, you're going to hell. You didn't vote Republican, you're going to hell. You didn't," like, that is what I, like, grew up in. This is the mindset, right? And so
Mhm.
when I had this moment of, like, I'm like, it was like I felt like I was looking around and, like, trying to turn to anybody I could, and they're all like, "Durr," and I'm like, "What is wrong with you people?" Like, and this is what it feels
Judge
like.
least, yeah, judge least we be judged, right? It's like judge
Yes.
not, and you will have the experience of everything that you judge. It's so
Yes.
incredible.
Yes,
Yeah.
and so I was like, "Oh, this is what those people felt like all those years."
Wow, that's so thank you, thank you for being so raw, honest, and vulnerable. You're gonna help so many people that you even owned that you were like, because I was that way with you. I can feel you. I can feel exactly. I was that judgmental little brat at 16 too. I was like, why do they do that? Why can't they get it together? Why can't they la 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 la? Yeah, right? Well, you're gonna
Yes,
yeah, bing. So you're there, and so I guess
exactly.
because you were so low, that little twinge of light or hope felt much bigger than if today things are soaring a little bit
Yes, and
close.
it's like
Yeah.
that was absolutely a turning moment for me where I was like, "I will never make anybody feel like this again." Like,
Yes,
yeah,
that's
and I distinctly can point it back to that exact situation.
wow.
And I even remember, like, it took me some time to, like, look back in hindsight and really be thankful for all of this opportunity and going through
Mhm.
that. And, like, if today there was a magic wand to, like, redo my life, I would leave that. It had to be there. And,
Yes,
um,
yes,
but I remember even in that moment of, like, making that declaration and being like, "No, I'm gonna be that one person that actually, like, doesn't point fingers and say, "Well, if da 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 da, this wouldn't have happened." It could have
mhm,
been anybody, and yeah, it was so that's what I mean of, like, really finding Jesus there in the sense of, like, that glimmer of hope, that feeling like there was something, and also from that empathetic standpoint of,
yeah,
really I feel like with a lot of times with religion and things, it comes into the having to do this in order to earn our way to heaven, having to be
yeah,
a certain way and all the things, and it's
yeah,
like, you actually look at how Jesus lived, he was against those things, right? And I think that, like, I love the show Chosen for this particular reason because I feel like it really shows it so well in a way that, like, reading it doesn't necessarily show. But you can really see where he stood against, where he was judged himself and he like kept going with what he knew to be true. And so for me it was just that awakening, and ever since then I've just had, I mean, I still go to church, I still believe in that, but I'm against religion. I'm for relationship. And I also think that there's a lot of times in that space where we hear people say that, but it's one thing to say it and it's a completely different thing to live it.
yeah,
um
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, like your religion is love, and they're I think because we have so many beautiful women of all different religions as well, and the one beautiful thread that I get to witness in interviewing them and is that love component, that heart to serve. Because like, okay, I want to jump into something else because this is really cool because you've got so much good, and so thank you for, because I think a lot of times we see women like yourself, they're confident, they're powerful, they're out there moving and shaking, and it's the backstory that made them that. Like if you didn't have that, you know who knows how many people you will help. You may have just been that little judgmental, it was easy, and then people, you couldn't relate to people and you would have thrown them and cast them aside. Where now you're like, I'll dig deep with you. I'll get in there. Because I like this thing that says you are known as a wealth energetics activator. That's such a
Yes.
cool thing. I'm like, talk more about that. What is a wealth energetics activator? And like, how does it play a role in scaling businesses to these big heights? I know we're shifting, but I'm like, come on, guys, here's the gold at the end of the rainbow. Let's go.
Yes, yes, yes. Let's do it.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
So, yeah. So for me, like I said, how I was growing up was seeing that duality with money, coming into my 20s, chasing money, and it became this roller coaster for me of like losing and gaining and all of these things. And that was because I was in the chase of it. That was because I was, hustling, grinding, knew what I wanted to not go back to, and
Mhm.
wanted to work towards different kinds of life. And
Wait, wait. So
what
that's
I
really, really important right there. So you were going because out of fear, you weren't moving from
Yes.
inspiration, and you were avoidance, from what I heard you say. Is that right?
Yes.
You were just like, I'm just trying to avoid going back to that pain. So I'm
Yes.
hustling out of fear, not that, right? Is that what I
I
heard?
would say it felt like a mix for
Okay.
both, but it was really like also like actively like I will never go back there, that type of thing. And I will never, that wasn't an experience, that was not an experience I wanted for my own children.
Mhm.
And so actually that was one of the key reasons we moved out of New York in the first place. Because of the escalated gang violence that I had mentioned in the beginning kept going even more. And so anyway, but yes, I would say it was a mix of both, but like it did it if somebody would have told me, oh, you're being successful because you're trying to run away from your past or not create that again, I probably wouldn't have resonated with somebody saying that directly to me. But in hindsight, I can absolutely see how that was a motivating factor for me, even though I thought I was moving forward with what I wanted.
Mhm.
So yeah, so this wealth activation and my focus on that was my own journey to realizing that like I was in this hustle grit building companies, successful person, and but burning out, but hustling, but feeling
Mhm.
like if I just earn more and do more, I can finally buy back the time with my kids. And I had to come to this real
Mhm.
moment with myself where I was like, no, it actually gets to stop now. I get to take charge of this now. I get to shift this now. And I saw this next level of success.
Yeah, what was that moment though? Okay, so because when you say you were building these companies, like what type of companies were they? Were they like online? Were they bricks and mortar?
All of the above. Some of
Okay.
them, probably majority of them, brick and mortar. And I was working directly with these CEOs to help scale the company and helping them become the visionary of their business and take their business to the next level. And I oversaw specifically the operations, accounting, human resources, admin, like basically all the inner workings of this. I did this as a CFO, but then I also quickly uh, found myself in a spot where I would end up being in the office with the CEO and basically coaching them and mentoring them and helping them through how to create this next level vision for their business and becoming more efficient. Because I found that for a lot of CEOs, the trap that they get into is that they feel like they've got to do everything. They feel like they've got to hold it all. They feel like they got to be fully responsible. It's just this whole thing where it's like you can't do it all, you can't be it all. You have to be in that role of visionary and you have to be driving this forward. And specifically the disconnect I would see is I don't know if it's because of the experience that I went through, or maybe it's just the way God made me. But one of my gifts is like, I am that person where I'm like, you're saying one thing, you're doing another. Like the math ain't mathin'. And so what I would often find is that these CEOs are like, yes, we're this kind of company and we're this kind of company and we're that and that. And then they're acting a certain way, making decisions in a certain way. And I'm like, what you just said in there and what you're doing now, like this doesn't add. And this is why you're in the loop you're in. This is why you're in the burnout you're in. This is why your team's not performing the way that you want and that you say you desire so much. Because really when we're in the CEO seat, the biggest part, and it's so simple when I say it, but it's massively overlooked. You have to lead by example. Like really, really.
Yeah,
in an
yeah.
embodied way. You cannot just be saying something, and you cannot come in the place of do as I say, not as I do. That does
And
not work. That does not fly.
yes,
You can
yes.
preach that all day. You can try so hard, but I promise you, when you actually start embodying the things that you're saying you stand for, the way that you want things to run, when you're actually doing that first, you will see a shift in your team and your company without ever having to say a word about it.
Oh, amen.
And
Did you
yeah.
get you because you said like you came in as a CFO, like did you go then to college and get like your accounting degree or
Yes, so I have my master's in accounting. Yeah.
awesome because we went from this to like ooh this okay
I know.
so I just wanted to give that shout out. So you went and got your master's, wow, in
Yes.
accounting. Okay, so then you came in as a CFO. I love it, but you kind of played like COO, CFO, COO. Sounds like because you were
Yes.
handling all the systems and
AKA
holding
CEO
holding their feet
mentor.
to the fire. Yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah,
that's
this is
where
great.
my visionary mentor title, where that really comes from, because I almost accidentally stepped into that, but also I don't want to say accidentally. It was also natural. It was a natural progression.
Yeah.
But when I started this shift and all of these things, I really started it in corporate first. And then it was like, okay, and also how can I apply this to my own life? And really seeing the need for, again, my passion comes from really helping women. I stand for women to be financially sovereign. I don't care. Like, I mean, I've been with my husband for over 18 years, absolutely love him. Neither of us are going anywhere. And I get to also be financially sovereign. Like, it has nothing to do with like, a feminist movement of poo-pooing on men. Like, we get to have great relationships, and financial sovereignty is uber important because
Yes.
firsthand how it can end up with my mom and how she was caught off
Mhm.
guard, and you never know what's going to happen. And I just really see that need for women to be able to step into it, those of us who want it, right? It's not meant for everybody, but for those of us who know that they have a bigger mission in their life, know that they feel that calling, they feel that drive for more, and really helping support women in a different way, because so much of what is leading women are other men, and men, I can just tell you from the majority of the CEOs I supported, all of the CEOs in corporate that I supported were all men, and men
Mhm.
absolutely need this work too, but it's a completely different game for women because men get the pass. They get to be able to be
Yes.
like, "Oh, you built that great company? Oh, congratulations. Your wife's so great at raising the kids while you build the company." For women, it's like, "Oh, you built that company? Well, how's your relationship with your kids?" It's like,
Mhm.
we have to hold all of the things. We don't get any pass. There's nobody who is going to celebrate us for building a successful business, and they
Yes.
find out we're a mom. They're like, "Well, how did your kids turn out? I bet they turned out crappy because you weren't there and you were busy, building your business." That's the kind of energy that is approached with women. We're looked down upon. We're not given
So
credit for our
true.
success. And
So
men are pat in the back because they woke up this morning. It's like, come on, you know.
yeah, and not from a negative way, but there is such a difference. That's why as girls, I think it's so important more than ever that we really stick together and we have these communities because we're like high-fiving each other because only women understand what it's like to be in
Yes.
that role. And I actually I'm so glad you said that about the children because we're measured by our children. And
Yeah.
it's so interesting. So we're carrying all the full roles of it. Wow, girls. So then you're tailoring your mentorship then to meet the unique needs of these women, it seems like. Like what's difference?
Yeah.
Because you and I've done similar paths because I've grown and scaled companies all over the world too. And I've only had a few women that were the CEOs. It's been 98% men, and that's why I started our program too, the On Target for Success, helping women build their own companies. I'm so excited having you on here with this because there is a different mindset, there are different responsibilities, there are different ways which we have to navigate. Because so how do you tailor it so that the women, what I notice, they get to stay in their feminine energy as they scale and grow? Because I notice a lot of them like going to that place of masculine energy just to survive.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, and that's exactly it. Like the women that I have, been on executive teams with or, met on boards, they're very masculine driven. It tends to be. But I think that there's a way that, well, I mean, I don't think I know that there's a way that we get to do this from a grounded place of who we really are and not having to feel like we have to show up in a man's world as a man, right? I
Mhm.
remember one of the conversations I was having with one of the women that I was on an executive team with, and we're talking about, we just had a difficult board meeting and we're the only two women in the room. And, she goes to me, she's like, Sarah, sometimes you just have to walk into that room, slap your dick on the table, and show them yours is bigger than theirs. And I was like, no, this is not the energy.
But I ain't got one. I'm gonna come. Oh my goodness. So I'm gonna come in. So how do we show up in our heels and our warrior women, right? In the
Yeah.
femininity. Like really, how do you balance that? So what is your coaching technique for that to stay in it?
Yeah. So, specifically for women, this is where it's a balance of strategy, mindset, and energetics. Strategy, we've got down, right? This is like
Mhm.
if you're doing anything in business, you probably have too much strategy. A lot of times the women that I'm working with, we're unlearning first
Yeah.
because we've got to come with a different approach because it's exactly that. They're like, "Well, I got to show up in a man's world. I got to
Mhm.
do this. I got to do that." And it's like so they've already got enough strategy. Usually they've already also got enough mindset in a way. Sometimes there's like it's a different approach to the mindset. It's really I find with high achieving women, we don't realize how much of our high achieving is actually driven by imposter syndrome, is actually driven by perfectionism, is actually driven by feeling like we got to show up like a man. And so it's a different kind of mindset work because if I just said, "Hey, we're going to do mindset work," they're going to be like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, I got this." I promise you, you don't. Like your high achieving it's a trauma response
Mhm.
to whatever you've experienced in your life and you figuring out how to make it in a man's world. That's what the high achieving is. Otherwise you wouldn't be experiencing this and you wouldn't be that high achieving burning self out and this whole cycle of probably showing up burning yourself out then retreating to rest, showing up burning yourself out retreating to rest. This is usually the pattern I see. And sometimes that showing up and burning yourself out can be a 6-year process and it's like I just got to hurry up and sell this company so I can make, or I just got to hurry up and reach this level so I can make this money and then go rest for a year and go on a sabbatical and then come back and do it all over again. It's like, or we can approach this in a way where you can actually bring full balance into your life. And so that's where the energetic side comes from that I
Right.
think that often either gets discarded or we just think, well, mindset and energetics are the same thing. They're absolutely not. And
Mm.
so really mastering and cultivating how this is responding in our body, because we can take all the strategy and the mindset, but if you're not bringing it into your body, if you're not, a lot of times this is even like simply breath work and coming back to anchoring in
Mm.
your vision and what you're creating for yourself,
Mm.
you're making decisions really what's in a trauma response to hurry up and get it off of your plate. And so, what I love to do with the women that I work with is we create visions. And this is where it comes in the visionary mentor. Because oftentimes when I say vision, Amy, what comes to mind when I say vision? And I'm like, create a vision. What do you think I mean by that?
Yeah, for me, it's like my ideal life. Like if I close my eyes and say, "What's the vision for my life?" Like I see well every part of it. I see my healthy body. I see my happy home. I see great moments with my kids and with my friends, and then I also see like my company. I'm reaching all these beautiful women, watching them transform their lives, and I'm making these new client friends, so clientships. And I'm traveling. It's everything, the life alignment wheel. I just see it all, and Yeah, but I'm smiling. Like every little cell in my body is like smiling through it. And yeah, I'm happy. That's my
Yeah,
vision.
I love it. And I love the what did you say? The clientships, like
Yeah,
relationships
like,
with
because my clients
I
always
love it.
become friends. Like, there's no like,
Yes.
like that's one thing I was thinking, like energetically. What's one area I could work on? Is like I want it for my clients more sometimes than they're able to see it and want it for themselves. Does that make sense? Like,
Yes.
oh, if
Yes.
you could only see what I see, you're almost there. I can see you're getting it, and I'm like, come on, just dig a little more.
Yeah. I love that. And yeah,
But
thank
thank
you for
you.
sharing.
Thank you
And
for
I
taking me there. Oh, thank you for taking me
yes.
there. That's really nice.
And thank you for sharing. And where I really like to get clarity here is I actually
Mhm.
like to divide the visions. And so,
Mm,
because I think that, like, while what you shared is beautiful and I absolutely love it and it was great, we also, it's within the breakdown of that there's often disconnects that we don't even realize.
mhm.
And so I first start with, what's the vision you have for your life, home life, your
Yeah.
relationship with kids, relationships with your spouse, friends, like what does that look like, your self-care routine, all of that good stuff, travel, all the fun stuff. And then we look at, what is the vision, the future vision for your business? Where's your business going? Do you
Yeah.
know what your mission is 5, 10 years from now? If not, you should, right? A lot of new
Yeah.
budding entrepreneurs, or sometimes, I mean, I even have clients that have gone to 7 figures and I'm like, what's your vision for the next 5 years? And they're like, I don't know if I have one. I'm like,
We
so
even I love like you were such a good messenger for me today because I didn't even know we were going to talk about this, right? And I thank you for enough because like my business partner is listening with this as well, and I'm like, okay, let's hold our vision. Are we in alignment with our vision? Are we in alignment with our mission? Are we serving these women from this place of joy and happiness? Are we staying inspired? Are we coming from desperation or inspiration? Like every day, like tapping back into that place. Oh, I love this. I love this. I love this. Yes, keep
yeah, that's
going.
so
You're
good.
just
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
you're speaking my happy
So
language.
yeah. So looking at all of the things there, and then it's this hybrid of making sure that those things all make sense, that your personal, wait,
Yeah.
which hand did I do personal? Personal and business make sense. And so what I mean by this is, oftentimes, especially the women that I work with, they come to me and they're like, I really want time freedom. I really want to spend time with my kids. I really want to do this. And when I look at their business, they're like, and I'm going to go on a speaking tour and I'm going to do this. And I'm like, how is your business that you're saying you want time with your kids and you're setting your business up this way? This is a course for disaster. You're going to burn yourself out. This isn't meshing. It's not aligning with each other. So yeah, like within the vision of life and within the vision of business, it makes sense exactly what you said, making sure you're tapping into your vision when you're in making your business decisions and all of that. But it's also the side reference to make sure that they line up with each other and that it makes sense. Because we have all these ideas, and I get it. I'm multi-passionate, and I've got all the ideas, and my husband makes fun of me because I'm literally multi-passionate in all aspects of my life. Like, my dream home is like a huge farm with 30 acres. And also I'd love to like live on a mountain like mansion. And also I kind of want to just sell it all and be a nomad. And also I kind of want to live in an RV and travel the world. And also I want to go live in the jungles of Costa Rica.
Yeah. Oh,
That's what I
I
want to
think
do
you're
in my life.
from another mister.
And my husband's like, yeah, sure, we can make all that work. Like, and I'm like, the thing is like, for me, I know that those 5 different visions don't have to be the reality all at the same time. They get to be phases of my life, right? And so it's the same thing when we're looking at business, where it's like, well, I want to help women in this way and I want to do this thing, but also, ooh, keynote speaking tour. That sounds amazing. And also, I want to take my ladies on a retreat. And also, I want to be a nomad and live my life and go wherever I want and have complete time freedom and not be tied to anything. And it's like, you realize what you just said ties you to being in specific places at specific times. A keynote speaking tour is not doable when you're trying to build this whole time freedom and you've got kids and you want to be able to shut down at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. Like, it does, the math isn't mathing, right? But we start taking action on all these things because we want all the things. And then it's like, fastest way to burnout, fastest way to like, oh, I just built what I built and I absolutely hate it. How do I get out of this nightmare? And it's like,
Yeah.
well, first step is we need to make sure the visions all align and taking place from a, where is my life right now? What do I desire right now? Where's
Mhm.
my business right now? What do I desire right now? Also, where's my business going? Right? Because keeping that in mind. So it might look like if you're like, well, I really do want to go on a speaking tour. Great. Maybe that's 10 years from now when your kids are in college and you don't have to worry about them being so small.
Yeah,
And
and
so, yeah.
go ahead. No, I'm just coming back to that because even when you're talking about that, you got me thinking, because you're like the money coach as well. Then that's a huge component. Is like then even throwing in their beliefs around the money in with the business, because I see a lot of women, they're working so hard, but they have a poverty consciousness. So
Yes.
they're repelling the money. They'll work for everyone, and then they're not getting rewarded for their value, or remunerated for, because they don't really see how valuable they are. And that's huge too. And I was like, oh cool, the money coach. I want some money tips out there for women, like understanding how beautiful and powerful and how being remunerated is. Okay, I saw this stat, like if a man goes for a position, right, he will not even have all the qualifications and show up and say that he does. But if the woman doesn't have all the qualifications that they put out there, she won't even go for the job usually. And I
Yeah.
was like, I want to change that. I mean, I want women to see that, just go for it. Just fail forward fast. Just go for it. Have that confidence in yourself to figure it out. That's my passion.
Yes. Yes.
And coming back to the money part, and so I see that it plays out in the game of money, or the belief of money, or because so you've got your vision, and then ask. I love where you started with 100,000. So I don't even know if you knew this or not. So my goal this year was to help 100 women make $100,000. And
Oh,
when
I
you
love it.
was researching for the podcast, I was like, this girl's awesome. We're so in alignment, because I like the 100,000 as a starting point, right? Because
Yeah.
once you make that first six figures, then it's easy to scale. But getting that belief, I think the first 100,000, helping women make that first 100,000, and maybe your experience is different, but in my experience, getting them to their first time to six figures is much more difficult than getting them beyond that. It's like something about
Absolutely.
that first six figures that a light bulb shifts, like I can. Like once they make the six figures, like, oh, this is possible. Yay.
Yes.
So
No,
that's
I have absolutely found that is like, and this even happened for me too, where it was like for years I felt like I was stuck and like I was not having much movement. I was maybe like 80 to 90K, 80 to 90K, 80 to 90K, 80 to, I was like, come on, when's it gonna freaking break? And so yeah, but it was exactly that. It's like once that cherries pop, it's like off to the races. Now, the other one happens with the $1 million cap. This happens at
yeah,
seven figures. I see this all the time. People get to seven figures and then they can't break it. Or maybe they might do like light multi, like maybe 2 million, possibly 3 million,
yeah,
but there's something there. And oftentimes when they are trying to scale, it's within burnout. But it's the same for like as soon as you get that momentum, it's like once you break through that eight figures, it just goes. So yeah, it's interesting because there is the same problem, just at different
hmm
levels. And
hmm
sometimes it's even harder once you get past like the money mindset work I do is also with women at that like seven figure, multi seven figure.
yeah,
And sometimes it's even more difficult conversations at that point because pre six figures, you're ready. You're like, you're throwing money. You're like, I'm going to make this work. I'm going to make this work. I'm going to make this work. Once you're successful, you like the money. You don't want to, it's harder to part with it. Or
yeah,
it's like, oh yeah, okay, I'll do a $10,000 investment. And it's like, really? Let's look at that. When you were under six figures, you were doing a $10,000 investment. That's 10% at least,
hmm
maybe more if you're lower than, if you're not right on that cusp. You're looking to make like seven figures. The equivalent of that kind of investment would be 100,000, and they're like, oh,
hmm
100,000, I can't do that, right? It's like, so it's this fear even more so because it's bigger numbers. So it's like calibrating
yeah,
to these big numbers of like, how do I go and wire $100,000? That feels like it should be illegal. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't feel right. It feels scary. So yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, I have seen that too, is like that six-figure cherry is like sometimes the hardest thing to break through. And I know it was for myself as well. And what I will say is like, I think it's important. There's an importance in the hunger that is early on, but there's also that importance of like not compromising yourself in the process. I think you're going to thank yourself for at every level that you're scaling, where you're, maybe you're saying, hey, this is a season where I really need to focus here. And that's not what I'm talking about when I'm talking about burnout and all these things, but like really making sure that you're not building this box for yourself that's going to permanently keep you in this thing you don't want, right? Like, so
Mhm,
watching
mhm.
those commitments and the ways that you're building. Um, and the other thing that I would say in all levels, but especially what I see under six figures, is like, come back to the simplicity of it. Stop getting lost in the overwhelm. And there's a lot of information, there's a lot of marketing out there that leads you to believe you need
Mhm.
all the expensive software and all the fancy things, and you need a team and all this. It's like, if you can easily get to multi six figures with no team. I don't even have a team right now. I have a VA every now and then, and I hire help as needed, but I have no permanent team because I come back to simplicity all the time. And it was funny. I was just having a call this morning with somebody who, she's like, yeah, you have a team, don't you? I've seen your website. I've seen all these things. I know you have a team. It looks beautiful. But I'm like, no, I do this myself. Like, yes, I've done a photo shoot. I've had some people put together my graphics, but honestly, at least half of my stuff, if not more, my graphics even, I create myself because it's a creative flow for me. I like to do it. And also, a lot of times I can turn something over in like 10 minutes. It would have taken me an hour to explain to the VA what my vision was. I can just create it
Mhm.
quickly from my head. So it's this, and not to share that and say that you have to do these things, but it's just like, we often walk into building our business and think we have to have all of this fancy stuff, have to hire team members. We don't want to do this, we don't want to do that. It's really looking at those stories that you're telling yourself and really
Yeah.
peeling back why you feel you don't want to do it. It's likely because you're overcomplicating what you think that process is, and it gets to be super simple because you get to decide it's super simple. You don't need all the fancy, complicated stuff.
And I think it's also personal because some people like to work independently, and I
Yeah.
love teams. So like, so, more introverty, extroverty. So I always like, I have the most amazing team, and like when one's down, like the other one, it's kind of like a prop up. So and I understand like there if you're on a bad team, look out, life is hell. So there
Yeah.
is the balance between the alone creativity and where your giftings lie, like where you have fun
Yes.
creating and have like can you do it all? Yes, it's going to take more time and more learning, but if you're having the peace, like you said, in the creation of it, then it's worth it.
Yeah.
And I just love, like, my team is so beautiful. They're my family. We celebrate together. So I agree with you 100% that knowing your vision for yourself, then being at your vibration and your balance will attract the people in the way that you want to grow. And
Exactly.
how it, because you can have for me, I have simplicity in my team because I know this person's got this and this person's got this, so I can focus on what I love to do.
Yes.
And it depends on your business model. So I totally agree with you. Well, Sarah, I really, I know I'm taking a lot of time and I really, really appreciate you going deep, but what's one piece of advice? Like I like the simplicity. That's good advice. But women who are ready to take their money business to the next level, but feel unsure about where to start, you've given them the vision, you've given them the, like, what's the first thing that you're like, that you said, what story are they saying, telling themselves about it? Like, what's one thing that you can do to help them take the beginning steps?
Yeah. So one of the biggest shifts, there's two things within this that I find are common threads within the money game. Um really shifting your perspective into the decisions that you're making with your business. This is investing in mentors, investing in getting
Mm,
your business up and running, real investing like in the stock market, like all the above, looking at everything through the lens of an investment. And
mm,
what is this going to do for me long term? So, sometimes I hear people that are like, well, I'm not ready to hire a mentor. I'm not ready to hire a coach, or I'm not ready for this. It's like, okay, but there is a trade-off for everything. You are either paying with your time or you're paying with your money. So the cost of convenience, do you want to go faster and collapse time around that? Hire a mentor. Do you want to
yes.
figure out and do it yourself? Google is a fantastic resource. Good luck. It's going to take you a couple of months to like dig through,
Yes.
right? So
Or
and
longer.
and then you have trial and error, right? So for us, and Amy, I'm sure you would agree with this as a mentor as well, like there's nothing necessarily new that we are teaching in the sense of like to build a business is to build a business, and it's whatever. So you can absolutely go find those things on Google, but what you're paying for is our level of expertise, the fact that I have done this for over 15 years and there's lots of errors that I have learned along the way, and I've got lots of shortcuts. I got this down. I'm sure Amy, like,
Yeah.
same, right?
Yeah.
Like you're paying for our level of expertise. You're paying for what we could provide, that like literally we can give you an answer in 2 minutes that it's probably going to take you 2 days to research on Google and then go implement it and learn it yourself. And so it's like, what's the
Great.
cost? What's the trade off there? So, but also looking at investments, like with everything you do from your money, right?
Mhm.
It's an
I love
investment to go food shopping. It's an investment in your health. It's an investment to pay your mortgage because you have a roof over your head, you have a safe space. It's an investment into paying your internet bill, your electricity, right? So this brings in the conversation I have with a lot of women about releasing the shame around bills and debt. And
Mm.
everything, even that debt that is burdening you right now. And I get it. I was absolutely raised in the household of you never rack up debt and you always pay your bill in full and all the stuff. It is such a societal conditioning. And one thing I have learned from literally being in rooms with billionaires is that it is a conditioning for the poverty and middle class, where we're taught that debt is bad. Billionaires, companies, they leverage debt because it's a tool that again allows you to invest in your future growth. And this is not a promo to say go into debt and go buy the Gucci bag. Like that's not the thing. But it's like just release the burden that you're holding, the shame that you're holding from having to hurry up and pay off the debt. And so the shift here is really looking at, no matter, I don't care if you racked up $100,000 buying candy. Like I don't care how dumb the purchases look.
Yeah.
Just look at it of like, that was a investment in my decision at that time, and that's how I'm choosing to look at it. And I am grateful for the banks extending me this opportunity, and as my gratitude, I am paying them back interest for lending me upfront capital that I did not have otherwise. And so
Oh, I love that.
entire perspective shifts the heavy things, the bills, the debt, all the things, into this is the life we're creating. And it's a tool and a vehicle to advance into this next level of wealth, extension of wealth that you don't have right now, but you are going forward and creating.
Yes. So this is good. So leading into that, then what's the personal routine like or habit that you swear by for maintaining focus and productivity and energy? Like what's your around making those investments and getting the ROI?
Yeah. So for me, my routine is really looking at what I wanted. I keep business hours. I have my business hours, I have my family hours, and I have my calendar set up where I put things for family on there first. So kids are in summer right
Wait,
now. When they were
it's
in
good.
school, go ahead.
Wait. Sorry. Just I want to like say that over and over again. I put my kids on the calendar first.
Yes, family
Oh, I
first.
love it. Family first. Yes, 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 yes.
And
I love
so when kids were in school, this was like, I don't miss award ceremonies. I don't miss games. I don't miss meet the teacher conferences, whatever. And it also gives me the hours. So summer is a little bit different because it's almost 6 o'clock here. And obviously I'm on a podcast right now, but our summer hours are a little bit different. But when my kids were in school, my business hours are 9 to 4 because I know they're walking in the door at like 4:01. I am done with business. And I have international clients. So I do allow for a day or two of some nighttime hours to accommodate. But from 4 p.m. to let's say 7, sometimes 8 p.m., it is strictly my time with my kids, my time with myself, my time with my husband, whatever the case may be. Because I have older kids too. One's going into high school. And so, sometimes it's not
it.
cool to hang out with mom that day. And it's,
Yeah.
but I always prioritize that. Now during summer, I have a different schedule, but I take a lot of breaks. I'm like,
Mm.
they know that I'm in here on a thing and they know as soon as this is done, I'm going and joining them and watching a movie tonight. Right. So it's like finding that balance. And also, this is the same where we keep our business hours, we keep our dedication. So, what I would say is choose how many hours you want to work during the week. Choose what days you want to work, choose what
Yeah.
hours those days you want to work, and stick to it. I have self-diagnosed from TikTok ADHD. I haven't ever been permanently diagnosed, but I'm pretty sure I have ADHD or some form of that. And so for me particularly, something that's super helpful is my power hour. And within my
Mm.
power hour, I make sure I'm doing my CEO activities. CEO activities are only things that generate income. So this is client outreach, client connections, uh, applying
Yeah.
to be on a podcast, whatever, something that is reaching more potential clients, responding back to emails, responding back to comments, doing social media. And so at least an hour of that. And I have, several days a week that I do that and I make sure I do it. And one thing for me, because I can absolutely have squirrel brain, especially with the kids being home from school, it's like all they need to do is ask me a question. And 3 hours later, the thing
Yeah.
isn't done.
Yes, yes, yes. And
So,
remember that you're
um,
getting judged on your kids, so you gotta
yes. So I love to first, we as a family talk about our schedule. Me and my husband have a shared calendar. We know when we both work from home, we're both coaches. So we know when each other's on a call. The kids know when we're on a call, so they know not to interrupt. And from a focus standpoint, I absolutely love to use binaural beats. And they've just been a game
Mhm.
changer.
Mhm.
Highly recommend putting both head buds in and putting that volume up.
Mm.
It just really helps your brain be able to focus. They have binaural beats for all sorts of things. I think they even have one for like creativity. I tend to just use the one for focus because whether I'm creating or putting out content or whatever it might be, I'm focused on whatever that task is. So when I really need to get something done, power hour or whatever it might be, I put those on and that's really a game changer.
I love the word focus in that. What keeps you motivated though to push forward? I like, okay, so you have your schedule, you've balanced everybody, but to stay resilient because you're working from home and it all depends on you to go out and to get those new clients and to keep it going. So, but what keeps you so that you can stay resilient on those challenging days?
Yeah. I'm always tapped into my bigger vision, what I
Mm,
want
yeah.
to create. And for me, I think I'm like now so like tapped into uh my bigger calling that this has been an evolution, right? This isn't because I don't want anybody to hear this and be like, well, that doesn't happen for me. This is like, I mean, I have been on this path for over a decade. So this is a culmination of just practicing, coming back to my vision, coming back to what I desire to create. But
Mm,
um and not attaching what I'm doing to results. I don't need any external validation, right? So social
yeah.
media specifically is one of the biggest things. I don't really track any metrics. I might get curious every once in a while and be like, I wonder how many accounts or how many things I had on this reel. But this does not dictate. I post content all of the time And I know that a lot of my buyers are silent buyers, meaning they're binging my content and they're in my DMs. So, and I that has been evidence for me. And I also remind myself on those days where I'm like, that was a really good post and it barely got anything. And like, maybe two people commented. I'm like, nope, but I know that my woman is watching. And,
Yeah.
this is especially when you're working with those next level people, those what tend to be like more of the high ticket clients, overachievers,
Mhm.
high achievers. Um, they're busy doing their own thing, but they've got their eye on you. But
Yeah.
they're a CEO, they're showing up, they're doing the thing. And so they're not having time to stop and comment or engage or whatever. But when the time is right, they're going to jump into your DMs. And so just really trusting that you get to show up and the external results in that immediate moment don't matter. And it's really looking at it from more an objective standpoint of like, am I doing the things I'm supposed to be doing? Am I letting
Mm,
people know what I have to offer? Am I showing up? Am I putting myself out there? Okay, cool. That I'm doing a great job. And that's all I have to worry about.
perfect. Here's a life changing question that I want to know. What
Sure.
is a question? Because I love questions. I'm all about questions. Yeah, I think hook the mind questions. So, what's a question that someone asked you in the past that profoundly impacted your life? Someone else asked you this.
Um, I don't know.
That's okay. Like for example, um, one of our guests here said they had somebody ask them, "Who are you doing this for?" Like they were doing their business, like, "Who are you doing this for?"
Oh,
Or
yeah, yeah.
like, I like I'm drawing a blank right now, but it's like that kind of question, like where somebody said, like, "What do you want out of life?" Or "What's your vision?" Or what's a question
Yes.
that someone asks you where it's like, "Wow, I never thought about."
Yeah, I think that the first time somebody asked me like why I specifically want to work with women and
Mm,
me telling my story about my mom and having this realization of like that took somebody else, like a conversation, that realization even came out. Even the whole piece of the thread of the control of money throughout my life, I didn't realize that thread and how I was raised and what I saw with poverty and going to holidays in big houses and all the things. um I I never made the realization that it was like the theme of money throughout my entire life, like literally since I've been born. So I don't know if it was necessarily a specific question, but it was the conversation and like the life storytelling, and then like the other person having like a, did you realize that this is connected to this? And I'm like, what? Mind blown,
there you go. There was the question. Did you realize? So,
Yes, yes.
well, who has been then your most significant? Because you love serving women, same as me. But who's been your most significant female role model? Would you say that's influenced your journey to success?
Hmm. I would say, oh my gosh, I mean, there's so many women that like I've loved for so long, but the two biggest um profound shifts were within two of my mentors, that they do things completely different, and they were that example for me to be able to do the same and really helped me break outside of the box. And so the first one is Melanie Ann Layer. She's a
Hmm.
multi-million dollar coach, and a luxury coach for women. And the other is Jacqueline Shaw, and she is all about energetics and energy, and really doing that on a whole different level than anybody else out there. And so it was my mentorship with both of them. I did a retreat with Jacqueline in Costa Rica, and just seeing like both of these women have like that next level of embodiment where you can tell like they actually apply the work. They don't just say.
Yeah,
Um, and
you're
like I said, I've always been that very intuitive person where I can look at somebody and I'm like, what you're saying is not what, you know what I mean? So
yes,
it's been a very big experience for me finding mentorship that is in such an embodied way, because I always had a thing in the back of my head when I've seen other mentors up until that point of like, well, you say that, but I'm not seeing that, you know. So it was a disconnect for me, and so when I found them, it was really a game changer.
Yeah, what you've been through, I bet you have a pretty spot on BS meter now, girl. So here's I would like to end in closing with this last question. What is one question that you believe everyone should ask themselves so that would unlock their potential and achieve their best life? Like, what's one reflective question?
That's a good question. I would say, is this truly in line with my calling, or however that wants to end with
Mm,
you?
yeah.
But I believe that most of us are in this work because we know that we're here for more, that there's a knowing, there's a calling, there's a sense of something bigger out there for us. And really, as you're making decisions, make sure that you're making decisions from a place where it makes sense and it's in line with that vision.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's a great question. So, Miss Sarah, what an amazing, amazing time that we've had together. So, tell me, where can our listeners? I know that you had mentioned that you'd like to give a gift to our On Target for Success audience, and that is just so amazingly kind of you. So, would you like to share what that secret gift is?
Yes. So it is my ebook that I would love for you to go ahead and download for free. It's called Unapologetically Imperfect. And so this is really to help that high achieving woman. Like I said, there's oftentimes things in there that we don't realize are attached to perfectionism, imposter syndrome, all of the things. And so it's really to help that high achieving women break through to next level of success. And at the end of that book, you will find an opportunity to be able to connect with me on a call if you want to discuss how I can support you further. So, want to invite you to that as well.
That is so great. Okay, ladies, so make sure that you get that book. We'll have all the information for you easily and readily available. Sarah, thank you so, so much for sharing this incredible journey. It's been so inspiring. Wow, your story, I would never have guessed. And then that's what I love about this is, the women we get on here, they're on target for success, so they're showing all their beautiful. And I love that you were so raw to let us see beneath the beautiful and all the good stuff that made you this beautiful shiny sword, right? It's so inspiring. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So for those people and beautiful women out there that are still wanting to connect with you and learn more about your work, they're going to get your ebook. They're going to be able to follow your journey. Where would you like to direct them? And would you like to share any of your quick upcoming future things to look out for?
Yeah, sure. So, the best place to connect with me is on Instagram at the Money Coach 888. And then you can check out my website, sarahdumascoaching.com. And yeah, I would say that the best way just for knowing when this is going to broadcast is pay attention to my stories. I share a lot in my stories of what's happening next. I share some things that are like today only kind of special. So it's like my stories is the place where all the action happens. So connect with me on Instagram and pay attention there. And then also feel free to message me if you want to know the new things going on in my world.
Thank you. Okay, I know we're going to have some ladies that definitely want to reach you. You guys will benefit from her. It's been such a blessing. Thank you so, so much again, Sarah, for sharing your wisdom and for just being on target for success. Thank you, thank
Thank
you,
you so
thank
much,
you.
Amy.